economic slowdown. This is no longer the question nowadays. It's more about how bad is it and how long will it go on for. Corporate results are pointing to it, auto sector numbers show it, markets reflect it too. And now the slowdown story has turned political as well. Former Congress President Rahul Gandhi has put out a tweet saying, Mr. PM, the economy has derailed and there seems to be no light at the end of the tunnel. If your incompetent FM is telling you there is light, trust me, it's the train of recession coming at full throttle. Now, concerns over the economy and some government policies, especially post the budget, have been growing. But are India's current economic pains due to poor policy? Should government take responsibility of the slowdown, or is this just political rhetoric? To speak on this, I'm joined now Vaibhav Agarwal of the BJP, Sanjay Jha, political analyst and Congress sympathizer, and political and economic journalist Madhavan Narayanan joins us on the show as well. Welcome to all of you and thank you for speaking with us. Vaibhav, let me start by giving you an opportunity to defend, because the government has been at the receiving end, frankly, not just by the former Congress president, but market leaders, industrialists, those who have been supporters of the BJP have also been questioning the policies recently of the central government.
Good evening, Tamanna. See, I'll tell you what, the problem with most people, and the controversy, of course, started by Honorable Mr. Rahul Gandhi, a lost MP, etc., lost party president. I don't know what all should I, attribute to him. But a person who has no economic know-how, a person who has no degree in economics, a person who has never worked on economics, except he knows the economics of corruption well. So that's definitely political. As far as non-political comments on the subject matter are concerned, let me tell you that an economic slowdown has varied conditions in it. And nobody knows it better than Economic Times and you. Why? Because there are sector-wise growths and slowdowns, then there are urban versus rural, and so on and so forth. When you look at the second quarter's results, which is April, May, June, you would see that yes, there is a slowdown of about 2%. The estimated growth was about 11 to 12%, and the growth that we are seeing is about 9 to 10%.
Yeah.
But this is a reactive slowdown. You have to understand that the budget has just come back. The interim budget was hailed by everyone. The budget has come back, and we also see that this government has been doing a lot of policy overhauling in last 5 years.
No, 1 minute.
So obviously
is this a reactive slowdown, and are you connecting it with the budget, Vaibhav? Are you saying this is you said it's a reactive slowdown and the budget has come back? Can you clarify what you're trying to say?
I'm saying it's a reactive slowdown to the policy overhauling that the government of India is implementing by and by. Yeah. And it is only a reactive slowdown because of change of consumer preferences also. The slowdown that we are attributing, or Mr. Gandhi wants to talk about, is clearly in terms of a sector-wise growth. There are those sectors which are growing, then there are those sectors which are slowing down. Of course, consumer preferences
Which ones are growing? Which ones are growing? Because right now FMCG is in a slump, auto sector is in the dumps, telecom is in a brutal kind of space, consumer sentiment is terrible, the banking space is hurting. So look, there are two parts to this debate. One is, and I started by saying, I don't think anyone is right now questioning whether we're in trouble. So the question is, why? Is it the government's responsibility, and have we done enough to stem the flow?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
May I take this on?
Yes, please.
Quickly. Now I'll tell you. First sector, the FMCG. The FMCG has seen a rural slowdown, but an urban pickup. Now, technically, if you look at it, the rural slowdown, the rural market growth has always been estimated 3 to 5% ahead of the urban growth of the market in the FMCG industry. However, if you attribute this reduction of 3 to 5% to a 1 to 2% or an equalization to the urban growth rate, then of course you would call it a slowdown. I would call it a formalization. So there's a difference of opinion there. Economics is not microeconomics. When you talk of slowdown and economic slowdown in a country, you got to look at it from a macro perspective. Now let's look at it within the FMCG industry.
Let me tell you industry figures from yesterday, core sector figures which have come in, because you've spoken about some of the macros, GDP figures, core sector figures, IIP figures. Vaibhav, there is a problem. There is a problem. I'm not saying that the government has done something necessarily where it's become rubbish. But the data is not showing fun times. There is a problem. People are hurting. Businesses are hurting. So I think if you're going to start off by saying nothing is wrong, it's a formalization of the economy. I mean, you're saying consumption patterns are changing. People don't want to buy small sachets of soap and shampoo anymore.
No, that's not right. I don't agree with you. The personal sector growth, personal category growth, and the food category growth has seen more than phenomenal growth, estimated growth. The estimated growth was 6 to 8%. It's seen 10 to 12% growth in the food category,
Okay.
11 to 12% in the food category, whereas the personal and home care and category has grown to 9 to 10%, which was estimated to 6 to 7%. Why are we looking at it like this? Exactly why I am saying that this is formalization.
Okay.
When you look at the coal sector undergoing, there is a change in the mining sector and the manufacturing sector. The policies are being implemented. The tax man is looking at a transparent regime.
Wow.
The corruption
Let's get into the tax man. Let's get into the tax man for a bit, because we've been talking about tax terrorism here. But before that, I just want to play out a clip today from Mr. A.M. Naik. And of course, we started this by showing you Rahul Gandhi's tweet. He's the former Congress President. One's not quite sure if he's the leader of the opposition. He's not actually right now. But he's sparked off the conversation where he's blaming the government squarely. It is something that industrialists and market voices are not ready to do yet, but they've been hinting at it with a slew of tweets. We'll play them out. Here's what A.M. Naik said today.
I think it is going to take a year and a half before the accelerated spending for development will come. The growth is going to be not more than 6.5%. My feeling is, though they claim it is 7 plus now, but if we can maintain 6.5, we'll be lucky. Well, I told you that the situation is challenging, and therefore how much to believe what government says and how much to believe what the statistical information that comes is something which each one has to make their own judgment and take a decision, which is what we are doing in L&T. America is keen to bring the industry back to America, or concentration of American dependence on China, they want to reduce, from what I hear. Now, number of industry has shifted to Vietnam, Thailand. Why has it not shifted to India? So a lot of openness and reform is required, and a special desk should be cleared what we can do in urge of America to diversify their supply in their supply chain, not only from China but other countries. How many American industries have come here? For last 2 years, the President of America is talking about moving industry out of China. But we were busy in the election, so we didn't do anything.
All right, that was A.M. Naik. That was A.M. Naik of L&T speaking. That's as blue chip as a company can get. I'm going to get Madhavan Narayanan in with his commentary. So, Madhavan, there are two parts to this question. And like I started by saying, we are in trouble. We are in trouble. The question is, whose fault is it? So, either the government should take back policies which are increasing the trouble, or bring in policies which are easing the pain. Are we seeing that happening?
Good question. I would say whatever we are seeing is certainly not sufficient enough to enthuse the markets. We could, for arguments or even credibly, say that some of the noise being made by the old Bombay club is irrelevant, such as Rahul Bajaj or Adi Godrej, because they are no longer necessarily the thought leaders of the Indian economy. But having said that, the crisis is real, because if you want it in 2 words, it is demand crunch. We do have a demand crunch, and even the interest rate cuts have not percolated down to the economy. Growth rates are down at the, Vaibhav Agarwal may give you a segregated or disaggregated approach, but the macro numbers are staring us in the face, and we are talking about being a tiger economy of 8%, 9%. Now we are trying to not go below 6.5%, so it's certainly bad news. So the question now is, who do you blame or hold accountable? Now, The BJP has successfully won re-election, and to that extent there is no political time bomb ticking right away. But there is a jobs time bomb potentially ticking, because if today's growth slowdown is tomorrow's jobs crisis. So is there anything being done? I don't see anything. The only positive signal that we got was from Nirmala Sitharaman, who said that a combination of what might be called a sovereign loan and some of the big ticket spending in infrastructure will revive demand in the economy. But we will see it when we believe it, and we also have to worry about the gestation lag in the spending, and also how much the capital infusion will result in actual demand, because the consumer economy and the infrastructure economy are not easily tied up in India. You know, we are not a sophisticated economy. We are still an agricultural monsoon driven economy. Given all this, let me just complete by saying one more thing. We see no light at the end of these two tunnels of the IBC and the NBFC crisis. Unless and until there is some visible signal on these fronts, the economy will be in a mood of uncertainty, and uncertainty means less investment, less growth. And therefore, the crisis is real. We need to see more urgent talk from the government. I'm afraid that's not so.
Okay, Sanjay, I'll let you come in on the question of why turn this political. Is it fair to turn this into a political blame game? Because for an economy to be at the situation where it is right now, it is also a combination of factors. You have global factors, you have trade wars brewing between US and China, which is impacting, world economies. You have a long-standing problem of NPAs in the banking system, which is in part inherited. Is it fair to turn around and say that this is the current government and the current finance minister's fault?
Tamanna, there is a first thing that we need to recognize. Politics and economy are always intertwined. If anybody believes they are not, then you're living in a fool's paradise. A political party which is a government takes certain decisions, and they all have at the end of the day something to do with their approach to industry, agriculture, and ultimately it impacts whichever voting constituency they want to cater to. Point number two, who do you blame? Do you want to blame the Congress? In the 2014 to 19, Narendra Modi and the Vaibhav Agarwals and everybody blamed the UPA even in 2019 for what happened in 2013. For God's sake, you don't need so much of time to turn around an economy. So the fact of the matter is that today there are two big problems. Number one, people don't buy into India's data. India's GDP is highly suspect. In fact, as Arvind Subramaniam himself said, the GDP itself may be at close to 3.5 to 4%, which is why the ground reality is very different from the headlines that you read in the pink papers. Point number two, and this is probably one issue that Tamanna, I hope that you will raise it up, is the size of the fiscal deficit of India. India's fiscal deficit is much higher than the 3.3, 3.4% that the budget was apparently predicting. And if that is true, because they are doing a lot of off-budget financing, then I can tell you with extreme confidence, I'm a student of economics, have been a banker before, I can tell you this without in cool aplomb, you are headed for a serious economic, shall we say, trouble going ahead. And you can take away some tailwinds, maybe there will be a better monsoon, oil prices might stay low, and the world economy may not be totally destabilized.
Okay.
But if your fiscal deficit is high, then at the end of the day, it is going to impact your trade deficit. You are going to find high interest rates. I do believe this government is talking about borrowing abroad because they are worried about the fiscal deficit, and they don't want to borrow locally in India because that will push the interest rates even higher. So I think India can expect, a major manufacturing slowdown. Now, Vaibhav Agarwal wants to live in denial. Good luck to him. I don't mind it politically. But the auto industry, which is in a massive slump, Tamanna, is almost 50% of your manufacturing activity. Think about the weightage the auto industry has.
Okay.
And it is an old economic maxim that if the auto industry of a country is struggling, the economy is in serious trouble, because it is related to credit markets, to ancillaries, to jobs, consumer
Wherever you
demand,
want to respond, auto,
and overall
real estate,
both consumer and institutional credit.
Auto, real
so we have a
estate, the
problem.
big employers. Okay, we have a problem. We have a problem. Has it been worsened? Has it been worsened? Weber, I just want to put into perspective, because we speak to representatives of corporate India all day, and there are a lot of things that they might not come on the channel and say, but they were high hopes. There were very high hopes from this year's budget. And frankly, the conversation after was all about the super rich tax, which may not do wonders for the amount of revenue it will generate, but has dampened moods and spirits. Do you think that there were some pitfalls which could have been avoided?
See, I'll tell you, this budget is to be addressed as not a new budget. This budget is to be addressed as a new India's budget, which is in continuation to business that has been done in last 5 years, lessons that the economy has seen in last 5 years. And thus this budget has further on added some provisions and the spending on public infrastructure and public development, and increased way of ease of doing business, and lesser taxes on the salaried individuals and so on and so forth. And this is a combination of lot of measures that this budget talks of. And this budget is also, of course, this budget is not the final budget. There are 4 more budgets that have to come in, and then there are 5 more budgets that have to come in.
You've not answered my question at all. I'm saying we're in trouble. We're in trouble, and the only people who can fix it with policy are those in power and in governance right now. Do you think that the government is doing enough?
Oh, absolutely. You know, I did answer the question, but let me rephrase my answer to you. Your question is very critical to the health and infra of the government, of the India's economy. Now, I'll tell you how this can be addressed is very simply. A, consider this not as a problem. Show that confidence in the economy. This is a slowdown, which is a reactive slowdown to various changes and policies and so on and so forth. So we have to wait and give it time for formalization. The government has come up with measures. Policy implementation and tax measures are taking place as we speak. Some are to be implemented and some are already implemented. Mr. Naik himself said that when the public spending increases, the infra gets improved, the transparency gets improved. Obviously, it will take some time to come into the play. And that's how this is done. So this government is doing everything that it takes
what are we doing to make sure it happens? Because it won't happen by magic. What are we doing to make it?
Of course it won't happen by magic.
We're in a vicious slump right now. I want Madhavan Narayanan to come in.
And it will not happen overnight, Tamanna.
No, it won't happen.
Let's keep that in perspective.
So it won't happen overnight. We have to figure what has happened right now has also possibly not happened overnight. It has been a result of what we've seen, and some of the policy we've seen maybe in term 1. The problem is when you win an election again with a huge mandate, there is no one else to question Vaibhav. And then you need to come prepared with the answers. Okay, Madhavan, you want to come in?
You've described the situation very well, Tamanna, but let me ask 2-3 very important points. State 1 or 2 important points. First is there a time bomb ticking? I think the economic time bomb, if you look at the history of Indira Gandhi's rule in 1971 after a landslide victory, she was staring into the oil crisis as well as a major inflation problem in 2 years. So I do not rule out an economic time bomb if something is not done fast. And therefore, that is something that this government has to be careful about. It cannot rest on the victory of the other thing. However, I do have a small amount of sympathy for some of the stuff that Vaibhav is saying, although I am afraid he is himself not on top of this issue, because it is one thing to say the government is making long-term plans and all, but look at the way they have bureaucratized this whole, they have created a judicial bureaucracy in the case of insolvency and bankruptcy and NPAs, and they have created a bleeding NBFC culture in which nobody is seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, and therefore unless and until there are urgent steps, even if it means throwing money at the banks or doing something, things will continue to be in a crisis, and therefore this is something that they have to do. It is an economic imperative with a political implication. But I think there are sectoral issues here which need to be given. For instance, the emphasis on electric vehicles, where I would disagree a bit with Sanjay Jha, is that the automobile industry is going through a tectonic shifts worldwide, and India is not the kind of an America-like economy where you can say what is good for General Motors is good for America. Therefore, there is some elbow room for the government to act on, but this elbow room is, in my humble opinion, not big enough for the government to rest on its laurels or talk vaguely in terms of long-term measures. Most important of all, now this is where I have a controversial view, that in there was a saying in economics, we are all Keynesian now, we all have to be Nehruvian now. Whether BJP likes it or not, they may be good at Nehru bashing. Some kind of a commanding heights philosophy has to come in, because this is not an economy in which will solve its own problems. Because if you look at what is happening with VG Siddhartha's Cafe Coffee Day or some of the promoter level issues, India
BJ
has
Siddhartha's
a huge
Cafe Coffee
baggage
Day, I'm
of
sorry to
crony
interrupt.
capitalism.
1
But
minute, let him make
that
his
is
point.
not-
Vaibhav, let him make his point.
No,
Let him
let me
his point.
complete.
Sure.
No
I
one's
think the
interrupted.
point
Look,
is
we're having,
that there
we're
are
having a very sorted debate. Let's keep it that way. Yeah.
Yeah, we are not a perfect market economy. We are not a full employment economy, which I'm sure Sanjay Jha will agree with. We are going through a demographic transition.
Yeah.
We need proactive steps to fix the economy. Those,
Clear
that
points,
proactive
clear points,
spirit is
please.
missing.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Proactive steps are missing, and the reason why the VG Siddhartha case has come up, Vaibhav, and I know you want to talk about it, that's why I will come to you, is because he spoke about pressure he was facing from tax authorities, and a lot of
Tamanna, I want to make a
entrepreneurs came and spoke about it. Again, I will contextualize this saying we have no way of knowing what actually happened and what was going through that gentleman's
Absolutely.
mind. Okay, I know that. But the fact
Absolutely.
is, Vaibhav, let me just point out one thing. How that one incident has let out this flood of responses of what people have been feeling but have not been able to say so far. My question is, are you guys listening to those voices?
Of course, my answer is very simple, Tamanna. Yes, we're listening to those voices. Now, let me take 3 points before I forget and take on to the fresher point. What Mr. Narayanan just said, auto industry. I hail to his point that he said that it has to be a sectoral approach, and it has to be a model-wise, category-wise, demographic-wise approach on the entire industry. But you also understand that the auto industry is going through an overall, in terms of shift from BS5 to BS6, which is coming into force in the March. And they only have 2 more years, and then there was production line out. There were market entries of at least 10 new auto manufacturers in the industry, which has created jobs, infra, etc., etc. Let me point out another point that is very, very relevant, which my learned friend Sanjay ji pointed out in terms of fiscal deficit. The fiscal deficit from 75-78%, it came down to 69% last year, closing of financial year 18-19, and we are on the target to 61% for 20. So you have to understand the fiscal deficit is also being looked into. The capital expenditure has come down.
I think there's a little bit of confusion, Vaibhav. What stat are you referring to? What stat are you referring to?
I mean, ridiculous.
This is Bloomberg.
I mean, what number are you talking about?
Yeah, but I think
the capital expenditure reached at 18% of 2019-20 target, compared with 29% of the same period last year. You see, cannot.
You're mixing up your stats. You're mixing up your stats. One second.
I'm not mixing up the stats.
Yeah. The fiscal deficit in this budget was targeted at 3.4. There's a CAG report which says it could be higher.
I'm talking about the same period last year.
Yeah.
This is Q on Q.
Wait.
This is Q on Q you refer to.
I think while you sort out the figures, you're referring to, let me come to Sanjay Jha. While you sort out the figures you're referring to and what exactly you're trying to say, let me not guess on your behalf. Let me come to Sanjay Jha and come with a simple point of, Sanjay, at this stage, you know, for opposition parties or for critics, and I'm making an important point here, critics of this government to revel in the economic slowdown that we're seeing is not a good idea, because this is something that impacts everyone, and it's something that India cannot afford. So I'm not sure if it's going to really pay off to make a political point out.
Tamanna, there is no... Tamanna, let me tell you, what does an opposition party do? You go back to our entire election campaign of 2019. Mr. Gandhi and the entire Congress, I think the opposition talked about jobs and farmer distress. Today, they have got further aggravated. You see, one of the biggest mistakes we make is that just because there is a historical, public mandate given to Mr. Modi and the BJP on hyper-nationalism and national security, That does not mean that your macroeconomic or your micro issues have faded away. They haven't. In fact, I would say they have got further accentuated. Now, let me make the point. Even on the auto industry, this is not about electric vehicles. Let's not try and trivialize this debate. You are seeing falls in tractor sales. You're seeing fall in two-wheelers. So there is a larger systemic slowdown. Now, Madhavan made some very pertinent points, but we are not an export-led economy like China or the Asian tigers, Tamanna. We believe that the domestic demand is going to be India's big sustainable story. Well, that is actually now collapsing. Rural demand is weak, rural wages have actually diminished, and you have a very negative sentiment all over the country because private investors are not putting in new money in new capital. And until private investment actually begins to take off, India is headed for trouble because how much can you do in terms of government expenditure?
Do you have a solution, Sanjay Jha? What should the government do?
Well, let me tell you, I'm not. Well, let me tell you what this government should have ideally done. This government should have sorted out the entire banking system problem for which they had, I think, 5 years, which actually worsened during that time. You see, a lot of people are not asking this of Mr. Modi's government, that when the NPAs move up from 2.4 lakh crores in 2014 to 12 lakh crores, what did you do?
Banking
what did you do?
Banking, I'll give them because those numbers look bigger.
No, but they did nothing. And But Tamanna, 1 minute, I think you are getting it right, completely wrong there. You see, your NPAs have ballooned up and Mr. Modi's government actually did nothing to really facilitate investment for the SME sector. Now, the SME sector is frankly the fulcrum of an economic growth of India. That's where the entrepreneurship lies.
Now you've gone
and
from
it is
banking
virtually
to
dead
SME.
after GST execution and demonetization.
Vaibhav,
This was a double whammy. It takes a long time to recover.
Let me come to you for your last one, and I think the figure that you were referring to is the fiscal deficit of the budgeted target, which was 61.4%.
That's correct.
Yeah, so
we've achieved the 61% of the entire target in the Q1 only.
It's not a good thing. It's not a good thing, Vaibhav, because you've already the amount of room you had, you've spent 61% of it in the first quarter. So it's not necessarily a good thing. It's not necessarily a good thing.
But we have a target to achieve, and we are trying to maintain 6.3% when we close the year. Doesn't matter because we are also reducing our capital expenditure. That will add on with some extra cash in our hands
for the economy to grow. Anyway, let me not do an economic class here.
That's bad news.
Economic class here because there's really no point. Let me give the last word to Madhavan. Madhavan, do we hope to see some kind of responsiveness? Because this government knows that market and industry were rooting for them.
I think we should wait until September because some of the sovereign borrowing related issues will be getting sorted out by then. And if that results in a recapitalization of the banks and with some extra spending on infrastructure, there is some hope. But I'm afraid if the real fiscal deficit, including off-balance sheet borrowings, government borrowings are to be taken into account, we already have a lot of spending going on in the infrastructure sector, which are not showing results. So I think the government has to pump up the economies one way or the other, for which we need to see clear signals by November latest. This is what I'm looking at. If not, the government is gambling too much.
All right, let's end it there. And thank all of you for joining us in the discussion today. We hope this goes beyond political rhetoric. It's time for action, and action is needed very quickly. On the other side, we're talking about organic and inorganic growth. And the BJP seems to be going in for inorganic growth with a spray of acquisitions. Leaders, whether they're MPs from the Rajya Sabha or councillors, are joining the BJP in droves. Is that a dilution of their brand equity? That discussion coming up next.